Welcome to the first edition of the Maple Leafs Lounge. This is a roundtable discussion with the members of the Hockey Writers Maple Leafs team. I am your host and moderator, Kevin Armstrong. I'm joined by the Hockey Writers senior writer for the Leafs. That would be Andrew Forbes. And who said senior? Wasn't me, but we've also got the Old Prof joining us. And Peter Baracchini as well. Hello, Peter. And the newest addition to the Leafs writing team is Alex Hobson. Gentlemen, thank you for taking time out and talking about this team that everybody seems to be talking about right now. First up, since we got so much ice to cover, let's jump right in. William Nylander. A lot of talk about Willie for the last, well, I guess we could say years, but especially the last week. We saw he was on the cover of the Toronto Sun with IKEA instructions beside him. And then against Montreal, he was benched for the last 8 minutes, 45 seconds of that game. And if that wasn't bad enough, then the coach came out afterwards saying, quote, "I didn't think we did great things in the second period, but in the third period, we really got it going the way we wanted to. And I didn't think Willie matched that." Forbesy, I know that Nylander is one of your favorites, right? What do you do with William Nylander now?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Like Peter and I have talked about him on our podcast a bunch of times, and obviously, you know, I'm a big critic of William Nylander. I have been since he broke into the league. But that being said, I mean, 14 points in 19 games, and it comes down to consistency. And I think I compare him a lot to when Phil Kessel played for the Leafs, and one of the biggest things was just consistency. He had streaks where he would, you know, put a bunch of points together and then he'd be cold for a couple games. And I think that's what we see with Nylander. And I think it's a case where at this point you gotta know what you're getting. He's always going to be a guy that does the flybys. He's not your most defensive player. He's not a 200-foot guy, but at the end of the day, you know, 14 points in 19 games. How many guys in the league right now can say that?
That's right. Old Prof, can you jump in on this one? I know over the summer, there was always a bunch of trade talks about him. You wrapped up a whole bunch of trade rumors around him at one point, but those rumors have never come to fruition. Where are you at with Nylander now?
I like him. I think he's a good young fellow. And, you know, I keep thinking about, and I haven't been a hockey coach, but I've certainly been in my day an administrator, and I've had teams that I've worked with. So I made a point, I think, in a post last week that you know exactly what you're going to get with Nylander. If you can't live with that, and you can't motivate him and coach him into a different way of being, then you move him. But otherwise, I think that Dubas has decided that he's going to live with them. When they put Simmons on with him in that line, I think Nylander saw the place that he could shine. And I think if you're the coach, you figure it out. One of the things I noted recently was that in December of 2019 against the Red Wings, he was benched for 13 minutes. I think he and Kapanen played 3 shifts in the second period and then were benched the whole third period. And after that, he came out, and I think he scored 16 points in 14 games. So I'm thinking that was just after Keefe took over as the coach. I think Keefe had that in mind. He thinks this is a young fellow that I'm going to have to discipline every once in a while. I know exactly what I got, and that's the way he's going to deal with it. And I look for Nylander to come out and play hard hockey. It's too bad that has to be the case, but you work with these people all the time. They are what they are. And if you can't live with it, you move them. And if you can live with it, you figure out how to deal with them in the best way for the team.
Peter, is that where you're kind of at too? Is Nylander with this team for the next, I think it's till 2023, 24, correct me if I'm wrong, or is he being shipped out? Is his time done?
I would say for the time being, Dubas signed him to the extension, and I would assume that, you know, he wants to stay true to his word. You know, he signed Nylander, he wants to keep him for the time being. That is to say, if there's a deal that comes up and Nylander is involved and it benefits the team, you have to try and weigh out the options. Is it really going to be beneficial to try and move someone to maybe get some extra help on the back end as we've seen lately. But yeah, I'm kind of on the fence with him at this point. Like, great point producer, but at the same time, we saw a major gaffe in the recent game against the Montreal Canadiens, where he has John Tavares with him, and then the puck automatically just goes to an open wing and it leads to a turnover. So, and we also saw him, the benching, Jason Spezza takes over his spot. John Tavares gets an assist leading to the Alex Kerfoot goal. So obviously, there's some issues surrounding his defensive play, and we've seen that quite a bit. But overall, you can't deny the fact that, he is a really good point producer, and he has gone to the dirty areas, especially in the front of the net recently and in the past. So again, kind of on the fence, but we'll see where it goes from here.
Alex, you're 1 week old onto the Leaf Rider team, so give us your fresh perspective on this whole Nylander dilemma.
Well, truth be told, I think you guys already more or less hit the nail on the head on what I was going to say. I think Nylander's a very polarizing player, and he has been ever since he held out a couple of years ago. But in my opinion, he's on the most team-friendly contract of anyone on the team. And like you said, Prof, he really responds. He seems to respond well when Keefe benches him, and I truthfully think it's only a matter of time before he gets going again. He's just one of those players that you have to kind of accept that he is what he is, and he's got his flaws, but I think it's only a matter of time before he goes on a little run of his own. And who knows? Maybe that comes if the Leafs, I know we're going to touch on this a little later, but maybe that'll come if the Leafs acquire that top six winger to fill that role alongside of Tavares and Nylander. But I think he's one of those players that you just have to be patient with, and you have to understand that he has his flaws and he's got his setbacks, but in the end, he is the skill makes up for it, and we won't be having this discussion when he's at the top of his game.
Kevin, I just wanted to say too, like, you got to remember this kid's 24 years old. 24 years old. I mean, in this league, it seems like an old player, but at the end of the day, he's got so much to learn. And this is a young team. To bring guys like Spezza and Simmons and that in there, you're teaching these kids how to be professionals again. And I think that's a huge note for Nylander. Is he's still got a long way to go in terms of his development and what he's going to turn into as a player. I think the Leafs will regret it if they end up moving him.
You know what I think back to is when Simmons was moved on that line, and there was that picture of Nylander beside Simmons, and he was smiling ear to ear. It was like, this is the guy I've been waiting for to have with me. And then of course Simmons got injured, but they were looking great. We know they're going to make the playoffs, right? Simmons is going to be back, so you don't need to make a rash move right now just to try to save it. Simmons will be back. Everybody will be healthy going in the playoffs. So I think we're on the same page on this one, which doesn't make for good TV, guys. We're supposed to be arguing at this point. Let's get to it with another heavily criticized player. Maybe this one will lead to some less kind words for each other. John Tavares. Peter, I know you wrote an article about John last month. He was doing great out of the gate. Suddenly he is just invisible out there. And when he is visible, we saw in Ottawa, he was making a lot of mistakes in that one game. What is wrong with John Tavares? We'll start with you, Peter.
Kind of putting me on the spot on, feels like I kind of jinxed them after writing that great article after coming out with a great start. But at the same time, yeah, it's really weird how this all unfolded. I mean, he came off that oblique injury, and it started to affect his play, his movement last year. Having the extra time off seemed to help them early on. But then as soon as like him and Nylander started going into that little, down spurt in terms of production, it didn't seem like the John Tavares that we knew at the start of the season. So I really wish I had an answer for that, but I really don't. But the turnovers that he has made has been really, really egregious, especially the McPaul goal that's sort of led to the comeback. And that, I know Leafs Nation Twitter went really nuts over that, and they were questioning, like, what is wrong with him. I wish we had an answer, and I would like to know too, but it just seems like maybe he's starting to try and crawl his way back. I know that the goal in the third Ottawa game where he shoots it from the blue line, that's the goal that he kind of needed, where Sheldon Keefe put Mitch Marner on his wing to try and get him going. And then he got that assist against Montreal. So hopefully we get to start to see some emergence with him. But I mean, it's a difficult scenario.
Right. I think John Tavares' struggles right now almost show just how great of a player Mitch Marner is. Look how great Mitch Marner and John Tavares played with for last season and a little bit of the season before. As soon as Marner got put out there with Tavares, he gets a goal, and now Marner is with Austin, and Austin's doing incredible things. So I don't know. What do you think, Alex? What do you do with JT right now?
It's really tough to say because you really don't want to break up that top line with, or at least the combination we have on the top line with Matthews and Marner, because we know that those two are absolutely electric together. They're one of the most dynamic duos in the league. But at the same time, it might be worth giving Matthews and Nylander a look, and then Tavares and Marner just for a couple games, because they're in a position where they can experiment like that. And if it gets Tavares going again, it could be worth it. I understand, Peter, you made a good point that I was actually going to touch on about how, in particular, that giveaway against Ottawa that resulted in the Nick Paul goal before the end of the second period. I firmly believe, and this might be a bit of a hot take, but I firmly believe that if Tavares doesn't give the puck up there, the Leafs win that game, because it was just such a lazy giveaway and it was such a preventable goal. And I think that last goal, right with 4 seconds left in the period, I think it gave Ottawa a lot of momentum. And I don't know what it is with Tavares over the past couple games, but he just hasn't looked like himself. He hasn't looked confident with any of the moves that he's made, and he looks like he's sort of battling himself with every single decision he makes. So I truthfully think it could be worth it to maybe give him a look with Marner for a couple games, because it seemed to work towards the end of that Toronto-Montreal game, and we've seen that Matthews and Nylander can thrive together as well. So I think it could be worth a look to switch those lines up if it gets Tavares going.
Old Prof, is it heavy criticism because he's wearing the C as well as it's a lot of contract, or what is it with JT right now?
Well, you walked right into where I was going to go. I looked back at Tavares' record. He's not playing any. When he was with the Islanders, he was sort of disappeared to me. I knew he was there, and I knew he was a good player, but he hasn't. His statistics are no different really now than when they were there. And he was known as a great player. Were we far away, he'd still be known as a great player. I think there's a bigger issue here. And that is, I think that Matthews is growing into not just an elite player, but he's now the go-to person for the media. He speaks more than almost anybody on the team. I liked it when Tavares was made the captain last year. I mean, Matthews had just come off that issue in Arizona, et cetera, et cetera. He hadn't earned the right to be the captain. But I think Matthews is good. I think Tavares, if he were not the captain, he'd be doing better. He doesn't have the personality that he's not the spokesperson. He's not the go-to person for the media. He's not the person who leads. He's not the person. I think he struggles with that. I can't know that. I just don't know. And I am a Tavares fan. I'm everybody's fan, right? So if you're not going to get much controversy from me, because I really like all these guys, and I like Tavares. I think he's a good player. I don't think he should be the captain, and I don't know this, but I think it might weigh on him, and I think that's a difficult position for him to be in, because I think Matthews is not just emerging as a player, he's emerging as a leader, and he's emerging as a spokesperson for the team. And I think that may change. I think that may change over the next year or so, but you wouldn't never move Tavares from the captaincy now, but I think that's going to come in the next while.
Forbes, you and Peter and I were on a show with Mark for the Hockey Writers before the season started, and Mark asked the three of us, is there a leadership issue with the Leafs? And I think all three of us kind of looked at each other saying, maybe there is, and that's why they're bringing in Thornton and Simmons. So not only what the Old Prof said, that Austin is growing into this great leader, they also brought in some other pretty good leaders in that room. Where are you at with this? Is the C weighing down John Tavares at this point?
Look, I'll start by saying that, Peter, you should have never written that article. No,
yeah, I'll take the blame for that.
No, honestly though, this is what I love about Leafs Nation and I love being a part of it. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, again, I'm going to go back to John Tavares has 17 points in 19 games, and we're sitting here criticizing what he's done this season. And I get it. The consistency, we want to see it. We're seeing Mitch Marner, 30 points in 19 games. We're seeing Austin Matthews score basically every time he touches the puck. We are getting so spoiled as fans of the club, but are there a lot of voices in that dressing room? 110%. You got a guy like Joe Thornton who is known to call out his teammates when they're not doing a good job, which isn't a bad thing. You've got a guy like Wayne Simmons who's been around the league for such a long time that he's going to have a voice. A guy like Austin Matthews who is certainly stepping into his own. I mentioned it to Peter today that he's third in hits for the Leafs right now behind Hyman and Muzzin. I mean, just the ability for him to add the intangibles to his game has created him or created a much better player in Austin Matthews. But I don't think we'll ever see the Leafs at this point in time break up Marner and Matthews. You're talking about the Oilers taking away McDavid and Draisaitl. It's a duo that you just can't separate at this point in time, knowing what they're able to do. I think the problem right now for Tavares is consistency. And, you talk about this mystery top 6 forward that's supposed to come into the lineup at some point. Tavares needs to see some consistency on his line. That top 6 for the Leafs right now, that second line has been rolling the same way that their fourth line has been rolling. Too many different names coming in and not enough consistency in terms of getting a chance to create that chemistry. And I think if we see that, I wouldn't be surprised to see Tavares turn it around. He knows what he needs to do. He's hard on himself. At the end of the day, I mean, this guy comes from a family of athletes. His uncle played for the Buffalo Bandits in the NLL. Like, these guys play with their heart, and you can see the frustration on his face. I wouldn't be surprised, to see him turn it around in the next few games, and maybe you just need to get that monkey off his back. But I mean, guys, like 17 points in 19 games. I think it speaks volumes that we sit here and kind of question his ability as a leader at this point.
Yeah. And it goes back to the old prof. We like all these guys, and Leaf Nation. I think the Leaf Nation loves all these guys. That's why it's over loving at this point. But
Absolutely.
when you talk about JT, there was a moment when he scored that goal, finally getting out of that rut, that they looked at him on the ice, and he was staring at the stick where he writes his birth dates of his kids. And that, to me, I was like, we still have to remember these are people, right? They get attacked like crazy, but these are guys just trying their best out there. And like you said, man, 17 points in 19 games is nothing to sneeze at right now. So,
and on top of that, Kevin, another kid this year with everything that's going on. I mean, I'll speak from experience. Having a kid with in the midst of COVID, it's not easy. So, I mean, take that into account as well. Like, this is a guy who's dealing with all these exterior issues on top of being the captain of probably one of the more storied franchises in the NHL. It does weigh on you, regardless of what you say.
All right, let's go on to the mystery player. That's what it's titled, but it might as well be the Elliotte Friedman topic, because this guy keeps on bringing these up. We love Elliotte Friedman. He's well linked up into the NHL. He always finds the smoke, and eventually there's the fire. But 2 weeks ago, he threw out this mystery top 6 forward. And then on the Fan 590 a few days ago, he said that this forward is going to be there to push Nylander and Tavares. Pretty much those last 2 gentlemen we just talked about, they're going to be staying. We're just trying to find somebody that's going to push them, according to Mr. Friedman. So now I'm going to start with you, Alex, because your first article on the Leafs was suggesting maybe Iafallo could be that top 6 guy. So how about we do it this way? Everyone throw out who you think that guy could be and why. And we'll start with Alex with Iafallo.
Yeah, so honestly, when I wrote that article about Iafallo, there were a lot of different factors that went into why I believed he was the guy. And truth be told, it just makes too much sense in every single aspect. He's, first of all, if we're going by recency bias, he's off to a great start to the season. He's got 12 points in 16 games, which I think fits right in with a top 6 player. He also has a very controllable contract that's up at the end of the season, so the Leafs wouldn't have to move around too much money in order to acquire him. I think he makes, if I recall correctly, $2.4 million, and his contract is up at the end of the season, so you don't have to worry about anything beyond this year. And honestly, I really like his two-way game, and I think he's one of those guys that you can kind of plug anywhere in the lineup and he'll succeed. Like in LA right now, and LA's in a playoff spot, he's been playing alongside of Anze Kopitar on the top line. And would he be on the top line in Toronto? Probably not. But if they're looking for someone to fill that top six role, he plays left wing, and right now there's a gaping hole on that second line with Tavares and Nylander, and I think he would fit in perfectly there. And the final point that I have to make with that is that we all know that Kyle Dubas has a history of trading with the Kings at the deadline. 2 years ago, he acquired Muzzin for Grundstrom and a first-round pick. And then last year, we all know that he made the trade for Jack Campbell and Kyle Clifford for Trevor Moore and a couple draft picks. He seems to have a good relationship with Rob Blake. And I'm not quite sure if the possibility of acquiring Iafallo is as feasible if the Kings are in a playoff spot right now. But I think down the line, if they start to kind of come back down to earth a little more, and the Kings look to sell those guys, I think he could definitely be an option that Kyle Dubas looks at as we get closer to the deadline.
When I first started working with the hockey writers, I was covering the Kings, and Iafallo would always get the hardest working player of the month as voted on by the fans. So the guy doesn't have these superstar stats and everything else, not crazy stats at all, but the fans love this guy because he left it on the ice every night. And what a treat that guy was to watch. Yeah. I'd love to see him in Toronto. Peter, I know you were looking at the Ducks roster for your target.
Yeah, and it's kind of coincidental too, because last week we mentioned on our episode of the 6 and the 6 where, we were talking about the mystery player, and I just took a shot in the dark and said Rickard Rakell from the Ducks. And then Anthony Ciardelli, our Ducks writer, wrote why Rickard Rakell would be a good matchup, or the Ducks would be a good trading partner with the Leafs. And the Leafs may have some assets. And the reason why I think Rakell would be really great is because, kind of similar to what Iafallo is, he has a really good contract, $3.75 million. Obviously, a contract would have to go out. You're probably looking at Kerfoot because they have the same value, but you could get a lot of more offensive production with Rakell. Could be on the top power play line, second power play unit, still possibly with Tavares and Nylander. And you also get an extra year with him. So if you're looking in terms of like the contract situation, you get an extra year, kind of what they got with Jake Muzzin, which is very interesting. And I don't know if that's going to happen, but he was just an intriguing player because he was a former 30 goal scorer. And I think he could definitely push both Tavares and Nylander.
All right. Forbesy, you've been a little bit quiet on this front. So who is your mystery player? Who do you think the Leafs are looking at for the top six forward?
Look, I'm not a huge guy when it comes to speculation. I'm more of the type that sits back and waits till the fire starts to burn, and then I'll jump in. But I do like Iafallo. I do like Rakell. Again, Peter and I have discussed to like no real conclusion that even the Nashville Predators could be sellers this year. And I'm going to throw a name out there that I mean, there's obviously no speculation that he would come to Toronto at this point, but a guy like Victor Arvidsson, and a reasonable cap hit, just over $4 million. And he does have term, which is something that, I mean, obviously the Leafs would have to consider in deciding who they move in return for a guy like Arvidsson. But look, right now, the Nashville Predators have 3 untouchables according to Elliotte Friedman. And, it's way too coincidental that, first Freeze jumps on and talks about this mystery forward, and now he's talking about, the Nashville Predators as sellers. So for me, a guy like Arvidsson would certainly fit into a spot on the Leafs top 6. I think he'd be a great winger. Plays both the left and the right wing. But a guy that obviously, you'd have to see if Nashville's willing to part ways with him, and if they are, what the return is at that point.
Yeah, I think all of us probably, when we were watching the game on Saturday night and the intermission, when Friedman said it was a fire sale in Nashville, I jumped on that roster and started looking right then, like who can the Leafs target on this roster? What do you think, Old Prof? Anyone from Nashville or anyone from around the league that you think the Leafs should be looking at as that mystery player?
I don't know the answer to that question. I tell you what, I have a great number of people who consistently read my posts, and we have good conversations in there. And they really are Iafallo fans. They think that he would be a great asset for the stuff. Although contracts in the age of COVID really mediate what's going to happen, I think. So teams like Arizona, maybe even Nashville, teams that are struggling in difficult markets probably are not in a position to sign players. They're not bringing in the income that the Leafs have. So I would guess it would be some place that really is struggling financially would part with someone for. I mean, they're going to sell high and buy low. In that sort of sense, that they'll try to bring in entry level contracts or small contracts. So I don't know the answer to the question. I know my readers really do like iFellow, and that said, I can't even speculate. You folks are much smarter than I am about these things.
Jeez. I did find it interesting this week, though, when Dubas did make the trade for Carolina, basically giving up 2 contracts, bringing Alex Galchenyuk. I'm not saying that name right.
Galchenyuk.
Yeah, thank you. It was right there. But that brought it down to 46. So, is it at a point now for Dubas to start emptying the draft picks, looking for players and hoping teams are going to keep some salary? I don't know. I don't know who this mystery player is, but it's difficult to fathom how they're going to grab a top 6 player with a salary cap issue that they're up against.
So I want to point something out real quick, and I don't want to just completely make everything we just said irrelevant, but I did read Elliotte Friedman's 31 Thoughts post, and he actually did reveal who that mystery player was. And it wasn't anybody that we ever, none of us listed him. So he does come from Nashville, and I'm just kind of realizing this now, but that mystery player in the end was Mikael Granlund.
Granlund. All
Yes.
right. Well, let's pull the pivot on that one and take first shot.
So
I don't think we're live, but let's take first shots. What's your first views on that? We'll start with you, Alex, since you broke the news. What do you think of Granlund fitting in?
I think Granlund would be a good fit personally. If I recall correctly, he's got something like 7 points in 12 games. And I think the reason that Friedman mentioned him as the mystery player was because he was a guy that the Leafs were interested in signing over the offseason. And they couldn't make the money work. But now Nashville's in a position where they're selling, so it could be possible and feasible for them to make an acquisition for him. He's got 60-point potential, and he's sort of on that pace as of now. And I think if you slot him in a role in the top 6 alongside of Tavares and Nylander, then I think we could get that same sort of production out of him, and I think he'd be a great fit.
Forbesy, you on the same boat with a Granlund top 6 guy in Toronto?
Yeah, actually, when I was looking at it, it was between Arvidsson and Granlund when I was talking about the who I thought was coming over. But slightly under the $4 million mark. 1 year left on his this year left on his contract. 28-year-old. I think he's a great addition at any point in a season, especially when he's on the pace that he is. And like Alex said, 60-point potential. I mean, this is a guy that, just a couple of years ago, we were talking about how Nylander was a 60-point guy and he was top 6 for the Leafs. So, I think it'd be a great addition. I think he's a guy that certainly can push the fold when it comes to Tavares and Nylander. And I mean, I think it'd be a pretty solid addition. If Granlund can play at the top of his game, this is a guy that was very, very highly touted when he first came into the league. And I mean, obviously hasn't lived up to expectation and injuries have kind of hampered that, but I think it'd be a great addition for the Leafs.
All right. Peter, now I know you looked at Nashville months ago for looking at a different player from Nashville on different fronts as well, but what would you think? Or is this part of a bigger deal that Toronto may be working on, considering they do now have 4 slots available in those contract spots?
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you brought up. I did think that maybe Mattias Ekholm is definitely one of those players that is not untouchable. And I really think that I really liked his game last year. Really steady two-way guy that could really provide some steady presence in the back end. I just don't see it right now where you could possibly insert him into the top 4 where you have Riley, Brody, Muzzin, and Hall right now. Obviously, hypothetical, one of those 4 gets moved, then, Mattias Ekholm is going to fit in just nicely in that top 4. But if there is a bigger package deal where it is an Arvidsson or Granlund for Mattias Ekholm, and Maple Leafs are giving up another roster player and clearing up some cap space as well. I think it could work really well. I mean, it gives them more depth. It gives them more speed and more of a edge in terms of Granlund up front, where he could go in and battle in the corners and bring the puck up in front to throw it out to Tavares or Nylander. So I think it would work great on both offensively and defensively if there is a bigger picture going on.
All right. And I know the old prof is going to just say he loves everyone and anyone can come to Toronto and play, right?
I think we should all hold hands and sing Kumbaya too.
When it comes to that, though,
I don't know Granlund's body of work at all. So I haven't. I really know his hockey cards, but I don't know his work. So I have to beg off on even joining the conversation on this one.
Okay, but I do want you in on this next player, though, because we've talked about him a lot between you and I, Frederik Andersen. I've loved this guy for a long time. He came to Toronto when Toronto was at the bottom and was really the backbone bringing him up. And maybe that's where my heart still goes with this guy. But we've seen the struggles this year. He's had some great moments and he's had some bad moments, right? And he's under fire. We knew he was going to be under fire. So Old Prof, we love him, but is Frederik Andersen's time with Toronto near an end, do you think? How does Toronto deal with this situation?
You know, I don't know. I really thought the game that last night's game against the Canadians was a sort of a microcosm of the stuff. He looked fantastic, and then he didn't. So it was just sort of on and off. But honestly, it's just I'm sort of more interested in what the general manager does with things like term and things like contract. And I think that might be the deciding factor, although I cannot. Dubas is way smarter than I am, and he knows things I can't even imagine knowing. So it's very interesting to watch, and I'm having a good time watching this. And I like Andersen's play. I think he's been playing great this year. I'm surprised that he's here because I don't think the contract benefits the Maple Leafs. So that was a bit odd to me, but he's here. And I think that they're going to ride him and see where it's going. And look where we are now. I think things are really going well for the team. I mean, I'm going back to Andrew's point. Here we are, and we're not appreciating this team. I mean, this is an amazing season. I keep thinking, is this the season that Maple Leafs fans have been waiting for so many seasons? And I'm thinking that, boy, there's a chance. Because you got all these guys signing on. You got Thornton signing on. You have Spezza here. You have all these people buying in. And I think that this may be a team that's going to go a long way. And I think if it's going to go that long way, Andersen's going to carry them there too.
Yeah, when I look at those fan forums and some of the comments, I have to pinch myself too and say, this is the top team in the league, right? It is the top team in the league. Yet here we are talking about the starting goalie who's played the most games, has the most wins in the NHL. Peter, what do you think with the Andersen situation? Is it outside forces that make it look worse than it is? Where are you at it?
Everyone looks at like the numbers, the save percentage, the goals against. Yeah, it may not be up there as, people would like to hope for Andersen. But at the same time, I mean, there are games where he's on point and it's just a lack of a defensive breakdown in front of him that leads to a goal. Both goals against the Montreal Canadiens came off odd man rushes. I mean, you can't fault Andersen for that. But there are times where, he does let in a soft goal, but they come out with a win. So you got to take the good with the bad at some point, right? But even if you're looking at probably trying to improve on Andersen, you look at the free agents that are possibly up at the end of the year. Tuukka Rask with Boston. Whether he signs in Boston, we don't know. There's also Pekka Rinne, who's an untouchable in Nashville right now, so he may re-sign with the club. Jordan Binnington, Devin Dubnyk, Peter Mrazek are also free agents. Are those targets that the Maple Leafs go after? Are they an improvement over Andersen? Maybe Mrazek, because he does have a good team in front of him with the Carolina Hurricanes. So it's interesting where it's going to go. If they do go and make an improvement, it's going to be through a trade. But at this moment right now, I mean, aside from the first few games, Andersen has really picked up his pace and picked up his level of play, and we really shouldn't be complaining about it, even though we like to nitpick here and there.
Right. And I'm sure you guys all saw the Sportsnet stat that showed 19 goals blocker high, and that was the first goal he gave up against Montreal. The playbook is out on Frederik Andersen right now. And then also Sheldon Keefe said last week that they had given Frederik the night off because he's dealing with other stuff. And I was it goes back to that human factor. It's like, well, what's going on with Freddie? Is he all right off the ice as well? What's going on? So Forbesy, you've watched Freddie for 5 years with the rest of us. Is he playing the way he's always been playing in your view? Is his confidence down? Can the Leafs ride this guy to that holy grail?
I mean, I wouldn't say his confidence is down. I mean, you kind of mentioned it where, this is a guy whose family's overseas in the midst of all this, and nobody can come to visit. And I mean, there's so many storylines behind this. Is he the same goalie that, we've seen in the past? No, there's some weak goals this year that obviously, we want back. Andersen wants back. The whole team wants back. But I've said it to Peter. I mean, there's holes in this entire lineup, and it doesn't just start with Frederik Andersen. It starts with the breakouts from the forwards, being along the boards. I mean, it's typical, like, to the point hockey, X's and O's. The back end still isn't where it needs to be. Riley's been a huge liability in his own end this year. We mentioned it. Tavares has been a huge liability in his own end this year. Without guys like Marner and Matthews going down and blocking shots, how many more shots would Andersen be eating up? I don't see the Leafs, going a different direction in between the pipes at this point. I mean, you have to look when it comes to their prospect pool. They don't have a goalie in line. They don't have somebody waiting. If it comes to free agency, are you really taking that next step in terms of bettering your goaltending if you move away from Andersen? Maybe, but again, Mrazek has had a good team in front of him. He played in Detroit for how many years? For me, I don't think that's an improvement. I think we are so bound to looking at numbers, and this year his numbers are down a little bit. But I mean, you're talking about a guy who's also used to seeing 40 plus shots a game, and he's just not seeing that anymore. So maybe he's a guy that feeds off the action. I don't have the answer. That being said, if it comes out with a W at the end of the day, you're not going to see me complain either.
All right, Alex, I'll skip you on this one because I'm going to give you a last word in a minute. We're trying to stay on time here, but just to kind of wrap it up on the show now, coming up this week is back to those Alberta teams. 2 games against the Calgary Flames to kick things off, and it will be the first time that Mr. Jake Muzzin, has went up against his good buddy Matthew Tkachuk since the infamous puck flip at the chest of Tkachuk as time expired in the last game. I loved it, but Tkachuk didn't love it, and apparently it's led to a huge meltdown in the Calgary Flames locker room because no one backed up Tkachuk and all these other things. Is this overplayed at this point? Is Tkachuk overplayed at this point? Forbes, let's start with you. Are we actually going to see anything come out of this with Muzzin and Tkachuk?
I hope so. I hope so. Look, I mean, if you can dish it, you got to be able to take it. And at the end of the day, was Muzzin's puck flip, an amateur move? Absolutely not. He knew damn well what he was doing. And the same way Tkachuk knew what he was doing when he fell on Campbell. Tkachuk plays a Tkachuk game. I watched him in London for years, and he knows how to get under the skin of his opponents, and he did just that. And you know what? Sometimes your team's not going to back you when you want to make it into a sideshow, and that's what he did at the end of the game. So for me, I hope it continues to grow. I want to see this rivalry build. I think the Canadian division is great for it, and let's go Muzzy.
Old Prof, you wrote an article after Tkachuk landed on Campbell and Hurnham, and you talked about the arrogance and about Tkachuk in that article. It's one of the most viewed articles on the Hockey Writers website this year. What do you think of this player, and what do you think we're going to see this week against the Flames?
Well, I almost went to Kachuk as the mystery forward. I just had to, but I chose not to then. But it's I don't like Kachuk as a player. I think he's it wasn't his arrogance, it was his ignorance, in the sense that how could he turn somebody else's injury into, why are people doing this to me? And I thought, that is so self-focused. And maybe that's why, as you say, the Calgary Flames locker room didn't back him up. He is a self-focused young fellow. And I think that only goes so far when everything is about you. And it seems to be, although last night he was on an interview, and I talked about Andersen. Markstrom is a great goalie too. And they let in 7 goals against him. The team absolutely let him down. So, I mean, goalie play is just a crazy way to make a living. But at the same time, I thought Muzzin's puck flip was one of the best things that happened this season. I just thought it was well played. I thought how it set up so perfectly. You couldn't have written it in a movie. It was so good. But at the same time, what I thought it was just amazing. I'm not sure something will come, but Kachuk really played dirty, or not dirty. He just played him to a fault last night. Even the goal that the Flames did get was one where he pushed the goalie over the line. So, I mean, he's always pushing over the line, and it'll be fun to see. And I think the Maple Leafs don't like him because of when you watch the video on Campbell. I mean, maybe he fell with both knees right in the middle of his back, but I have never played hockey at a high level, but I did play football. And when you were losing and when it wasn't fun, you try to hurt the other person just by doing that. And
what happened to Kumbaya, Old Prof?
Oh,
Kumbaya, man.
I'm 75 years old now, but I wasn't always. So it's a tough one. It's a physical game. People do stuff, and I look forward to it. I just hope that Calgary comes in and gets whipped.
When you look at the Muzzin, and there was the thought that it just all started in that situation. But again, when I started out with the Kings there, I look back on that history, and you remember what happened with Drew Doughty against Kachuk. And Muzzin is good buddies with Drew. And the game after he took that really cheap shot from Kachuk, Muzzin was the first guy that he started to tangle with. Like, this goes back quite a bit further than just a few weeks. Muzzin doesn't like this guy. And obviously the Kachucks don't either, because we saw younger brother Brady go after Muzzin as well in Ottawa earlier this week as well. So, Alex, you joined the team at the right time, because you get to watch this fun battle with Muzzin and the Flames going now.
Yeah, and truth be told, I do think Muzzin's going to be out for blood, or not Muzzin, sorry. I think Kachuk's going to be out for blood tomorrow night, because I think he's going to take advantage of the fact that the Leafs won't have Simmons in the lineup. And while they do have some toughness, I know Muzzin obviously won't shy away from a fight. They've got Zach Bogosian. They've got guys who will stand up for themselves. But Simmons really was that guy who I think the Leafs can rely on to answer the bell for stuff like that. Like, we saw him fight Jordy Ben, I think it was, against Vancouver before he got injured. And I think Simmons has that reputation for being that guy to answer the bell when push comes to shove. And I think Kachuk is going to realize that, and he is going to take note of it. And I think he's going to do something tomorrow. I don't know what it is, but truth be told, I think it'll be worth it, because like you guys have said, that was just an incredible display of trolling on his part. I think that little flip, there was obviously no intent to injure him there. It was a super harmless flip, but we saw it got into Kachuk's head. And I think my favorite part of the whole aftermath was when he was trying so hard to slam that bench door. And poor Mark Giordano was standing outside of the bench just waiting. He was just waiting for Kachuk to finish it up, and he tried slamming it like 4 times, and then he finally slams it, and Giordano just opens it and walks in. And I think there's an aspect where of its team where they might be a little bit fed up with it and sort of his antics and thinking about himself. But I do think he's going to be out for blood tomorrow, and I'm excited to see what comes of it and see how the Leafs answer.
Well, if that's the case, Peter, if you're Sheldon Keefe, is this where you're going? They do have Sabrin now. Do you add some guys on the fourth line that might be able to answer that if things go off the rails?
I mean, that'll be a really good John Tortorella move, if you ask me, to try and match it, try and match the physicality and be on your guard. I mean, if he does try and do something, because we know how much of his antics have led to so many questionable calls. I'm just going to use that as the word, questionable instances and whatnot. So be on your guard right now. And if Muzzin is the one that he goes after, at least Muzzin would be able to hold his own. Because, I mean, even when the refs were trying to break up that fight, Tkachuk was trying his best to try and go after him. And Muzzin is just there laughing at him, like just smiling. So it'll be interesting to see. If anything, it will probably be something involving Muzzin. I don't think he would go out, or he shouldn't go out after anybody else, because then he's going to have a major target on his back if he does.
Mm-hmm. Muzzin, good Woodstock, Ontario boy, my hometown as well. I love that Jake Muzzin. So Alex, I said I'd wrap it up with you, my friend. I saw your Twitter and man, you must be still a little bit cold, but you're doing an awesome thing, a great fundraiser. Tell us a little bit about what it is and how we can get involved.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, I am a broadcasting student at Niagara College, and for one of my classes, it's sort of like a TV presentation class, and we were all assigned a story to do shoot an ENG on, and that's an electronic news gathering. I'm sure you know about that, Kevin. And we the topic I was assigned was the polar plunge and how it's moving virtual this year. So I interviewed the mayor of Port Colborne, and then just yesterday I interviewed the organizer of the polar plunge, and that talk really inspired me to do it myself. And I was raised in a family where you got to be able to handle cold water. My dad grew up swimming in cold water. He's basically a fish, and he'll force me to get in the water even if I don't want to. So I've kind of been trained to appreciate that. And it's for a great cause. It's for the Special Olympics of Ontario, and they raised a ton of money. I think they raised $560,000 last year, and they're already at over $100,000. And I just think it's a super great cause. And yeah, like Kevin said, I posted my video. I got my family members to just ruin my life. There's no lake to jump into this year, obviously, because it's all virtual. But I got them to dump water on me and throw snow at me and just make me freeze for a couple seconds. And I'm actually proud to say that because of some of the generosity of some of the people here at THW and my family and friends as well, I've almost doubled my fundraising goal. After I posted it, I'm sitting at just under $400. So for anyone that is interested in donating, it's open until the end of the week. And like I said, it's truly just for a great cause, and I couldn't be happier to be a part of it.
All right. And we see your Twitter handle at the bottom of your view there at Hobson A16. Go there, you'll find the link, you'll jump in on this great cause, and you got to watch this video. It's hard to watch, my friend, but I'm proud of you for doing it, and way to go. Hey guys, this was a great time. Thanks so much for it. We've got a great team to talk about this year, and I think we should make this a weekly thing. What do you think?
I'm in.
Absolutely. Why not?
Great.
All right. We hope Leaf Nation loves it as well. We'll be back here in 1 week's time to see how things unfold. Have a great day.
Thanks, Kevin.